there are two things that are risky in this video that you're about to watch. First of all, I am filming this with a cup of tea in my hands, and you might not know this if you're new, but if you know me, I do speak a lot using my hands. I'm Italian, yes, the cliche is true, we do speak with our hands. So tea has been spilling a bit everywhere while I was filming. So risk number one, I might end up this video drenched in tea, which is fine. And risk number two is I am currently 200 pages from the end of Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson, but because I've not finished that officially, it's not included in this list, and I could have waited and maybe not have time later in December to film this, or I could have just sat down and filmed it, knowing that Sanderson has a tendency of making me love his books to pieces in his last 100 pages. So I know that's a risk. In the time it took me to film this intro, I spilled tea on myself twice already. So it is a calculated risk. It's a risk I'm willing to take. Let's get into my top 10 for 2024 minus Oathbringer, because I've not finished it yet. So it might be there, it might not. You'll find out by watching the video. Okay, so another year is approaching its end, and I had to sit down and look at how many books I've read and so on. Because there are 3 weeks left in the month when I'm filming these, I will do also like how many I've read, categories and so on, videos probably in January or the very end of December, and don't quote me on these. You might have seen my life updates video. If not, I will link it down below to explain what's going to happen in 2025. But overall, I think it was a good reading year. It wasn't the best reading year, but I did not have many 5 stars. I think I will do the stats at the end of the year, but I had very few 5 stars, but I'm a very picky 5 stars giver, if you want. So when I jotted down this list, I really looked at books that sticked with me the most throughout the year. This may be because they shocked me, because I thought the quality was very good. Maybe I went on a journey with them. Maybe they were the end of a series that particularly I cherished and liked. And so there are few books that could have made the list, but none of those other books stuck with me the most. When I jotted it down, I didn't calculate how many, but turns out it was perfectly 10 books that really stood out to me. I want to mention that I did think for a brief moment to put Leviathan Wakes in this list. I didn't. The reason is just because it's the very beginning of a series. I really enjoyed it, so I will continue with the series. I think it has a lot of potential, and sci-fi is a new genre for me that I'm delving more into these days. So yeah, that's probably an honorable mention I had. It stood out to me, it popped in my head, but when I compiled the list initially a couple of days ago, it wasn't in there. So then after that, I've been thinking about it, but I don't think it's in the top 10. It would be probably in the top 12 or 11, just so you know. And I also chose not to put more than one book for author in this list. Not that I had many, but I'm gonna kind of mention 2 books, for example, for an author if I've loved both books. But yeah, I tried to decide on one in particular that stood up to me the most. That's it. Without further ado, you already know about the deal with Oathbringer from my intro. Let me put this down, because I am willing to drench myself in tea, but I'm not willing to drench my books in tea. It was very difficult to put them in order, to be fair, so take this list with a pinch of salt. Number 10, we have In the Name of the Children. This is an FBI agent's relentless pursuit of America's worst predators. Now, this is a non-fiction, and it's the real life biography, if you want, of a detective that used to work for FBI, and he was in a division of FBI that particularly tackled crimes against children. Now, just this will tell you how devastating this book was. It's one of the darkest, most disturbing true crime I've ever read. I am now 6 months in since reading this book, still terrified and upset at times when I stop and think about what happened. And I do not think that literature-wise, on a prose side of things, this is a great book or anything. I just think that this is a book that stuck with me one of the stories that really stuck with me the most, probably because it's true, probably because, you know, it really makes you feel and think about life and the monsters out there. Just had a few months after a stay in the cabin in the middle of the woods. Wouldn't recommend. I was absolutely terrified because of this book. And so yeah, my child will probably not step out of my house without any of us until she is, I don't know, 36 years old. After reading this, I found this both devastating and very interesting. I found his life and the way he also talks about his family, his life situation, how he came to do the job that he did. So he does put a lot of himself in this, in a short book. The reason why this is a number 10, it's not because of its literature value, it's more about the value I give to this man as a human who does one of the darkest, most difficult jobs you can do on earth. And I think he does it with grace, and I am just grateful that there are people out there doing this. So it's a value in the humanity and the resilience that needs to, you know, that you need to have as a human to do this day after day. Number 9, we go into a book that I initially did not know if I wanted to put it on this list or not. Again, I don't think it's much of literature value, in the sense that I don't think the prose was remarkable. I don't think the characterization was remarkable, but in the genre that it sits in, and for what it does, and the way it just kind of stuck in my brain rent-free for the last 3 months now, I just thought it deserved a spot as probably the best in the genre I've read this year. And I'm talking about The Ruins by Scott Smith. This is a horror story. It's about these kids from USA. They're on holiday in Mexico. The brother of one of them goes missing. Apparently he has been, you know, following this girl around after falling in love, and they just go in the jungle and never came back. And so this group of friends says, listen, we are about to approach the time where we need to go home and we need to recover my brother. So let's get him to come back home with us so we can return to the USA. And they start going in the jungle, and they approach a village with people that stare at them very weirdly, and as they move away from the village, they get to a place where there is no return. This caught me off guard because, first of all, I believed it was something completely different, and it turns out to be, it didn't meet my expectation in that sense, but also it created expectations that I did not know I had. It's one of the horror that really haunted me because I could really feel how trapped these people were. I could really feel the no escape, no hope left feeling. And it's quite of a chunk of a book. So seeing this happen in front of your eyes, seeing like, you know, this is gonna happen, there's absolutely nothing you can do to stop it. Up until the very end, I think it's a remarkable, I think, horror. It's my first experience of this kind of horror. I don't want to necessarily say what type of horror it is in case it's considered a spoiler. I think it kind of gives away a bit the main theme of the horror, so I'm not going to share that, but it was my first type of this horror. I think it worked well. I think the tension was kept at all times. I do have some issues with it in the sense that this is not a horror that leaves you with all your answers. Actually, it makes you live with a lot of questions, so there is that, but the guy has got something going on. The atmosphere can create it. It's not even the atmosphere, it's just the hopelessness it could create in this book. I think it made for a good horror, so that's why it's a number 9. It's the last non-fiction I have for this list, and I appreciate this book because of its message inside. And I'm talking about 12 Rules for Life by Jordan B. Peterson. Now, let me premise this saying that I am very much interested in Peterson as a psychologist, as a practitioner of psychology. I am less interested in the political stuff he's done more in the recent years. I am also not here to debate politics on my YouTube channel. I don't think it's the place. So I want to just say that what I look for in him is as someone who studies psychology, is, you know, in therapeutic services. I think he studied Jungian psychotherapy himself. I'm just on a professional basis, I am interested in his work, and I do really appreciate how he can communicate his messages. He's a man who's got such a wealth of knowledge when it comes on to psychology. Now, he's someone, for example, who's very religious, and I'm not religious at all, and this book does talk about religion a lot, and yet I could hear his point of view, which is very well explained, without necessarily having to embrace it. I don't have to embrace it, I don't have to change my ways or my thinking, while accepting his and trying to understand things from his point of view. And I think he writes in this case so well, and he also speaks well, to be fair, that I was in profound admiration of his 12 rules for life. So I think you might not like him as an individual, you might not know him as an individual, political side of things. I think it doesn't matter, you can still appreciate this book with the 12 rules for life very much. And that's what I did. I tapped the shit out of this because I thought so many passages, so many points he was making made sense. I think the rules were very simple. I think these are rules that everyone could put in place potentially, and so I thought, yeah, I actually learned a lot. And for example, there is one rule that talks about life is hard, you know, nature doesn't owe us anything, nature is not cruel, but nature is just nature, you know, life and death happen every day. So when you have a moment where you see something good, you might, you know, see a cat cross the street and you love cats, just stop and pet the cat. Enjoy the small moments in life, because you never know what's next. And those messages, for example, this is one of the rules, stop and pet the cat or something along the line, I really appreciate it because they are so true, you know, stop and enjoy the small moments because they are not granted. So yeah, it made me think a lot, it made me appreciate a lot of all of those 12 rules. Is education and culture on that topic, on the topic I was particularly interested in. It's very illuminating, so I appreciated his book, and I enjoyed his writing a lot. I think it does put on paper such complex concepts, and that it was quite readable for me. It made them quite clear throughout, despite their complexity. So yeah, I think that takes skills. The next one is a very light read. It's a read I had during the summer before my life turned upside down, and because it was a few days before getting some very heavy and bad news, those days they were so good because there was life before, and this represents life before, in those quiet days when there was no worries, not many worries at least, and everything was, you know, the sun would not go down until 10:30 in the UK, and I would just spend all day outside just enjoying. I was on a break from work, so I could really relax. And this book represent that time in the garden, just reading and not worrying about anything else. Then there is life after that, but we're not talking about that today. And I'm talking about Emily Wilde's Map of the Other Lands. This is a second book in what is at least a trilogy. I know there is a third book coming out. And you follow Emily. Emily, she works for university and she researches fairies that are real in this world. They are real, but not that common. They are not much out there. So she decides to go and explore and create an encyclopedia in the first book. And she travels to this part of the world, and she's followed by her arch enemy, academic arch enemy, who does not want her to get all the glory. So he's coming to be part of the research. And listen, in the second book, they travel to another part of the world. I must say, I had some genuine laugh out loud moments in this. I think she creates the camaraderie between the two, the way they speak, because this is also historical fiction, if you want, fantasy, like it takes place in the 800s. It's kind of like Victorian time if fairies were real. And the way before they talk, like, you know, that kind of talk, very formal, but then they just have this weird, odd, like, all sorts of adventures with this language, the combination of the language with what actually happens. I found it hilarious. The two main protagonists have this complex and yes, so sweet relationship. They're just the sweetest. I really root for them together. I really root with them separately because the romance is there, but it's not the highlight of the story. It's just woven in perfectly. There's a lot of adventure in these. We explore a different world at one point, and I just thought it was so entertaining. We get also a grumpy professor in these joining the crew. I was always smiling. Like, I don't think 10 pages passed by without me making a smile. I was just invested, immersed, and had an adventure. And those quiet days with the sun shining and me on an adventure in a magic fairyland, well, our world in the 1800s, but with fairies, it was just magical. The Invocations by Crystal Sutherland. Now this is my spectacular Evernight edition, which is breathtaking, okay? This is a horror, very like grim dark fantasy book, and it's about a serial killer who is targeting witches, which are hidden from society, so they're not out in the open witches, but they are among us. And there is a serial killer targeting them, butchering them. And so you follow these 3 women that for whatever reason, they try to go on a hunt for this killer. One of them, she is a witch herself. One of them, she has made a pact with the devil, or a bunch of devils. And that pact did not turn out as it should. So she's been basically rotting alive. It's great. Trust me, it's great. And one girl, her sister, got murdered by the serial killer, so she has a lot of stakes and she wants revenge for her sister. And let me tell you, this is a witch book where witches are witching. Witches are doing dark magic. There are devils, there is hell involved, there are dark spells, there are rotten alive corpses. They are Jude, our main character. I loved her. Very unlikable. It's one of those sassy, potentially unlikable characters I adored. There is sapphic romance. There is murder and betrayal, and there is just everything. And there is an action scene 3/4 in that it just gave me the chills. And if in the past you have found disappointing books promising witches dabbling into dark magic, if those books never met your threshold, just like, oh, that's not dark enough, those witches are not actually dark witches, or this is not spooky, I promise you this is a book that is going to redeem all the others. So good, The Invocations. The next one is one of those that I mentioned at the beginning that it took me on a journey, and I think as a YA, it's probably the only YA I've got on this series. No, actually no, it's not. I lied. It's the other one that I've got on this list. I think as a YA, it dared going down a dark path that not many YA had. And this is the end of a trilogy, so I really loved book number 1. Book number 2 was okay, but book number 3, rather than keep going downhill, it actually brought back the quality for me. I'm talking about Bright We Burn by Kristen White. So this is a reimagination of historical fiction. It's not fantasy, there's no fantasy element, but basically you follow the daughter and son of Vlad Tepes and what happens to them when they are given to the Ottomans as hostages to keep Vlad Tepes in check. And you follow both points of view. You follow the girl, Lada, and Radu, her brother. They are extremely different individuals. They are going 2 different paths by the end of book number 1, but they remain true to themselves to the very end. And the complexity of their character, or the dynamics between them 3, there is a third part involved, I'm gonna spoil anything. The way this concludes, the way Lada dares to be truly a dragon. Lada is an unlikable character that does not shy away from what she is. I think Kristen White did something remarkable with this, because, you know, a lot of the times when you get these broody, morally grey characters in YA, they do have this heart of gold underneath that it's uncovered, and they actually turn out to be actually so good and so great. She does not go down the path with Lada. And I loved Lada for who she was, despite her not maybe having this kind of big heart of gold. The way this concludes, it's great. It's exactly what the theme has been since the beginning. I think it's very true to itself up until the very end. And I do believe this is a criminally underrated YA series. Even adults could. I am an adult, I enjoy this very much. I couldn't tell it was a YA. There is nothing in here. I mean, the YA side is maybe that things are talked about, I think, with enough length, but they're not too much dissected. Like the story, it's a pretty like lengthy story if you want content wise, but it moves quite quickly. Yet I never felt like I was missing something. I think this concluded as it should have. I don't think it should have been more than a trilogy, but I think it's remarkable what she did in 3 books. And Lada and Radu will be just in the I've got a box in my heart with all my favorite characters, and they are in there, and they're not in there because they're perfect. Actually, they're very much flawed, but they own it, and I love that about them. We have a book that I've got downstairs, but it's my Italian copy, so there's no point in me just holding it, so I'm just going to insert a picture. This is The End of a Quartet by Elena Ferrante. I've read this in my original language. I was lucky enough to be able to purchase these books while I was in Italy, and so I read them in the last 3 years, I would say. I adored the first 2 books. Book number 3 I had a lot of gripes with, although by then the attachment was so strong. Book number 4 broke me and left me with frustration. I don't think that book number 4 provided everything I wished it had, and I do think that its power lays also in having done what she does in this book, which is leave you with a dry mouth. I was like, what? It's devastating, this book. I think there are a lot of characters that are extremely frustrating. There are a lot of things that are unresolved. We start with a big mystery that kind of remains a big mystery by the end. And she just slaps you in the face with one of those stories that it's not glamoured. It's a story about these 2 friends that grow up in a poor neighborhood in Naples called Rione, and you just follow those 2 friends through their life, how their life changes, their families, their love, their friendship, how that impacts their life, each other relationship, and so on. And it's just a book that feels like real. I have heard mixing opinions. Some say it's a biography. No one really knows who she is. The last time I remember, I think no one knows exactly who she is. She has not said that this is a biography, but also some elements feel so real that I don't think she could have made up all of it. I think some is a lived experience. I think the power of this story is that it feels like real life. It's not glamorized. Even people that have profound love for each other, they still get jealous of each other. They still do shitty things and say shitty things. Sometimes for the sake of it, sometimes because they're impulsive, whether is the case. And she really portrays human interaction in all their mediocrity at times. But that's how life is for some interaction. Not every relationship we have or not everything we do is glamorized. And as someone reads fantasy where the hero is always happy, the hero is always in conflict, the hero is not like just shitty for the sake of being shitty at times. This felt like so completely different. And I don't know if it's because I'm Italian myself, I visited the place, I've lived in Italy for almost the first 2 decades of my life. I don't know if that particularly this book felt and tasted like Italy, but I have a hint that even if you're not Italian and you want to know the vibes of being Italian, the atmosphere, what it means to be Italian, read this quartet. Just a story that I can't really pinpoint what it was apart from saying it was just deeply real. And I just felt so invested in the outcome that when I do not, even in the point where, the outcome is, well, I still don't know many things, I felt like these people I've known all their lives, which I kind of have, because every book you follow a different part of their life. So infancy, adolescent, adulthood, and to their, kind of seniors. In this last one, not mostly is into their 40s in this book, to be fair, late 30s. I just felt like I've lived a life through them, and so seeing this conclusion in all its glory and all its mediocrity again, I would say, it felt like just such an impact. It actually shot me in the chest, in a sense. Number 3, we have a book that, to be fair, it's a book that, to be fair, compared to the other that I'm gonna mention, I had, like in the others too, they're gonna come after, I do have a couple of complaints. If with this one, I don't, apart from the fact that it is a YA. It's the last YA of the list that you're gonna find, but it is a way, therefore things are moving fast, it's fast-paced, they're not, characters are not too much dissected or analyzed. So, but for being a YA, and for being a romantic fantasy, I don't know if it's a romantic fantasy, but there is an element of romance. This is the 2 individuals I wanted and shipped together the most, and I was obsessed when I read this book. I really loved it. And I'm talking about The Crimson Moth by Kristen Ciccarelli. I don't know if I think in USA has a different title or something. I don't know. I've got the Fairy Loot edition, and first of all, just can we appreciate the cover? I've got a thing for pink hair, and it's just stunning. Okay, I'm gonna try not to spoil anything because I think there is a lot of the fun part of this book is just finding out what the book is about and see the dynamics playing out. But you follow a witch and a witch hunter. In this world, recently witches have been outcasted, they've been outlawed, so they've been executed in mass. And now on the streets of the city, though, a witch is killing people. So the witch hunters are trying to find this hidden witch and execute her, and the witches are remaining, they're trying to hide among humans and pass as not regular humans so they don't get picked and killed. And then you follow these two people, they can't stand each other, but they somehow need to connect with each other to reach their goals. This is an enemy to, I can't say lovers, it's just an enemy to something else that kept me on the edge of my seat. I'm actually physically going to the edge of the seat just to communicate how much I loved it. And as someone who appreciates romance mostly when it's in fantasy, but none of the other books apart from Emily Wilde really were romance heavy actually at all. This is my favorite romance of the year, if you even can call it that. Also, it was entertaining. The witch side of things, the killing, the story moves very quickly. It ends with a slap on your face. It ends on such a cliffhanger where I was like, I need the second book. It's just a duology. I need the second book now. This is how you keep the tension between two individuals. This is how you make me pine for them, because I need to know what happens next to them. I don't know why. This just did its magic. It did its magic. It was everything I wanted to. I've read Fourth Wing. For example, all of those romantic fantasy, and it was okay, I enjoyed it, but none stood out to me like this book did. So if you have not read this, and if you like fantasy or romantic fantasy, do yourself a favor. The Crimson Moth. Now, number 2, I don't have in my hands because it's up there, and this chair, as you can see, moves around, so I could try and climb this and risk my neck, but as Serial Forel would say, not today. So it's not happening. I am not risking death right now, but I am at number 2. I had to choose between two Abercrombie books. I had finished the first Love trilogy with The Last Argument of Kings, and then I have read the first one in the kind of standalone quartet, which is Best Served Cold. Now, huge conflict here, because Best Served Cold is a story that remained with me the most of the two. Best Served Cold, it's a book that it's a journey. This woman who's betrayed, and she puts together this crew. Motley crew, you would say. I don't know if it's the English right word to say, but she puts together this crew to kill off everyone who's betrayed her. And this story just takes a very dark turn. It was funny as well. It was full of action, gruesome events after gruesome events. I do have a big gripe on something that happens in the end. One of the characters, his characterization, for how much, I don't have to like all characterization, it makes sense that unfortunately some people go down that route. I just felt hurt by seeing that happening, and I did not love that part. Not because I think it was wrong in doing it, who am I to say that, but I just think I didn't love that character arc, just because probably I profoundly found it disturbing. The Last Argument of Kings, I loved. Like, The Last Argument of Kings, I loved. I remember just enjoying it from the first page to the last. I thought that the characters developed while remaining at their core the same. So between the two, I will choose The Last Argument of Kings. I preferred this overall in all its entirety, but it did not stick with me plot-wise as much as Best Served Cold. So realistically speaking, just let me put both on this list at number 2, okay? Just don't make me choose. The Last Argument of Kings, I didn't have any gripes with it. I thought it was perfect. didn't have any issue with it. Like, I generally thought from page number 1 to the end that was brilliant. And there were some action scenes that lasted pages and pages, and I just couldn't look away. The end, everything, I thought it was just brilliant, and I am actually very much looking forward to keep reading Joe Abercrombie. That's the thing with his book. After The Last Argument of Kings, I was like, I need to read everything this man puts out, and I wasn't like that before reading The Last Argument of Kings. So because of also this, because of the love sparked in me of him as an author, I need to put The Last Argument of Kings. But Better Called, it was good. It's more memorable, I think, The Last Argument of Kings overall, but The Last Argument of Kings was just such a great time. And a number one, it's not a perfect book. I had a couple of things here and there that I had some, well, why? But it's just the book that's written for me. And it was the same with the first book. So this is probably a trilogy, I believe. So this is book number 2 in this trilogy that just came out either last year or this year, I don't remember. It was just that bloody good overall. It's just a book that calls to me in a way that none of the other Abercrombie is very close did. And I'm talking about Empire of the Damned by J. Christoph. Now, I do love this tiny bit less than book number 1. So Empire of a Vampire, it's perfection from page number 1 to page number 1000, where the pages is. This one, a couple of points I was like, well, there are a couple of things that I wish he had done differently, or maybe I thought they would be convenient, but the epic scope, how dark, and the writing, they are just the perfect combo for me overall. This is a story about Gabriel de Leon. He is one of the last few standing vampires hunters of this kingdom where now vampires are running wild. They are pretty much at the top of a chain of command, and now Gabriel, he is a how you call it, hybrid. I think, part of him does crave blood and he's part of the vampire, but it's mostly human, and he is a very conflicted, a very flawed character who takes you through in the first book through his journey on how he became one of the last few remaining vampire hunters from back in the days when there were many, how the vampires came into place, but also he talks about his hunt and rescue for one thing could really change the tide of this war that humans have been losing for a long time. So you jump back in time, but it's never confusing for me. I think everything was clear, everything was just perfect, and it feels like epic. It's an epic fantasy. It's an epic, grim, dark vampire fantasy, and that's exactly how you get me. Like, you don't have to say anything else. I'm gonna have like awesome writing. I'm gonna have flawed, very disturbing, very conflicting, but charming characters. I am gonna have monsters that you're gonna end up loving, and it's gonna be bloody. You're gonna have vampires in all their complexities, because vampires, they live forever. They are these monsters who are aware of their monstrosity, and it's just what I need. These are books that I will reread. I would probably scream if I was ever to know that there is a TV show or a movie coming out for these. And these are just books I know I will read. These are books I know that have changed me as a reader, because I'm like, what would be the perfect book for you? And then he wrote Empire of the Vampire. And now I can go around and just say, what is the perfect book? Empire of the Vampire. Empire of the Vampire. I was never, when they ask you what is your favorite book, and you always kind of, I don't know. Now I have a couple of books where I can say Game of Thrones is one of those. I would just splash in your face like Game of Thrones. Just don't ask me anything else. If you want to know what kind of reader I am, Game of Thrones. I can do the same with comics, for example. I can exactly tell you what kind of girl I am. Berserk. And now I have Empire of the Vampire as a second, this is the kind of reader I am. Empire of the Vampire, Game of Thrones. I can tell you, this is me as a reader, as a person, to be fair. So although the second book I didn't love as much as the first one, it's still such a bloody good sequel. And yeah, I am now looking forward to the third one. I think I'm going to be devastated at the end of the third one. I don't know if it's going to come. I don't think it's going to come up in 2025. So probably it's going to be a 2026 release. But guys, let me know, what was your favorite? What were your favorites of the year? Did I read them? Did I not? Did you hate any of the books I just mentioned? Let me know in the comments down below. We can have a polite discussion, as long as it's polite. I'm happy to hear your different opinions. I would love to know your favorite of the year. If you want to stick around, click the subscribe button. I'll see you next time. Take care. Ciao.